But welcome everybody, and thanks for joining this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Lauren and I work in the Sport and Active Communities Department. We've got a super exciting session coming up with Serena, who is a Roehampton alumni, Sport Roehampton alumni, and now a sport psychologist in training. If you've got any questions, if you just make a note of them either to yourself or pop them in the chat box, we will come around to them at the end. Or if you don't feel comfortable asking questions on camera, I'll put Serena's email address and also my email address for you to contact us later. So yeah, over to you, Serena.
That's great. Thanks so much, Lauren. Yeah, so hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. As Lauren mentioned, I'm a Roehampton alumni. And as Lauren mentioned, if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, please do feel free to pop them in the chat. We'll have about 10 minutes at the end for any questions that you guys do have. Yeah, I'll just give everybody a moment to either take a picture with your smartphone, or you can go to menti.com and enter the code. And what we'll be focusing on today, and again, this is a topic that is really of interest to me, but also I really enjoy working within the exercise space. We're going to be looking at identifying your why. Why are you motivated to exercise? For our new exercisers, why do you want to start engaging in exercise? And this is a really important question to really be able to identify what motivates you. We're also going to be looking at some goal setting. So you may have not heard of process goals. So I'll be really focusing on creating process goals, but as well as monitoring them and how those are important in terms of engaging in exercise. We'll also be looking at developing a routine and why that's really helpful in terms of maintaining exercise habits. We'll be looking at self-talk. And lastly, just to follow up, we're going to have just a brief overview of some top tips. Again, whether you're new to exercise or whether you're just starting to exercise. And as I mentioned before, we will have about 10 minutes for questions at the end. So please do feel free to pop them in the chat, and I will be answering those at the end. Or you can take your microphone off mute at the end of the session and answer questions. I'm also available to answer any questions that you do have via email if you're not comfortable with asking them within the group. So I'm actually going to start off by asking you a question. And again, you're going to be using Menti for this. And that's, what is your why for starting to exercise? And really starting to think about, what is motivating you? What is your reason for exercising? So again, by using Menti, if you could just answer that question. As I mentioned, they're all anonymous, so I won't be able to see whose answers. So this is really for you to start reflecting on, why should we start exercising? Okay, so answers coming in. To rest my eyes and body from staring at the screen all day. Absolutely. A lot of us will be sedentary all day and be sitting in a chair all day. So it's really nice to start to engage in some movement. To become a better version of myself, absolutely. To reduce pain in my back and to look and feel better. Yeah, keeping fit and keeping healthy, keeping in touch with friends and socializing. I really like that. I think whether it's exercise or a team sport, the social aspect of exercise is a huge component. Feeling good afterward, like myself, my body be healthy, to feel stronger and help with stress. Necessity of body, hobbies, stay fit, relieve stress. Yes, that's a huge one, especially after a long day, whether you're studying or whether you're at work. Exercise can be a great way to have release and release stress. To improve skills and improve physical and mental well-being, absolutely. I think as much as, from a physical aspect, exercise does improve, our bodies physically, it's also a huge benefit in terms of our mental well-being. Some really great answers there, guys. Now, again, I'm going to ask you another question. This may look like the same exact question as the previous question, but what is your why for continuing to exercise long-term, right? So we're not just thinking about the short term, but What is your why for exercising long term? So again, if you could answer via Menti. So really reflecting on that. What will help me really engage in exercise long term? Maintain health, yep, as I approach middle age, absolutely. See all the benefits of long time exercise, yes. Achievement goals, yes, that's something that will be coming on next. Teaching a level I've set up for myself, absolutely. So accomplishing things. To allow myself to improve education and allow me to deliver my knowledge to the next generation, I love that, absolutely. To experience less pain and become stronger as I get older, yes, so really looking at it from a health perspective. Keep myself strong as muscle mass deteriorates when getting older, yes. And I love that there's that education there. Achieve six-pack and maintain health, to make it a habit, yes. And we'll be talking about that a little bit later. Maintain my passion, okay, to accomplish my goals. It will help in the long run, absolutely. So again, some really great answers, guys. Keep structure in my routine. And again, we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But it's great to see, a lot of you are really looking at it from a health perspective and, what the benefits will be in engaging exercise and exercise for the long term. Keeping myself healthy throughout my life so I feel both physically good and psychologically good, absolutely. So again, that mind-body connection, right? It's, great for our bodies, but it's also great for our mind to engage in exercise. All right. Again, some really great answers, guys. Now, again, you might have looked at both those questions and thought, well, they look very similar. And the reason why I really asked you, what your why is for engaging in exercise and engaging in exercise long-term is really to establish what motivates you. And it's important to be aware of what motivates us. So individuals that are extrinsically motivated, so you see in the left-hand side, are motivated to kind of gain external rewards, right? So they're working out in terms of, changing their appearance or losing weight. Whereas individuals that are intrinsically motivated, as you'll see in the right-hand side, really exercise to improve their health, their personal growth, and overall they're exercising for fun and enjoyment and the activity itself. And what's really interesting is past research has found that individuals that actually create more intrinsic motivational goals actually tend to engage in exercise long term. They have a greater persistence to actually engage in exercise and overall increased psychological well-being. And I just want to say there's nothing wrong with creating extrinsic motivational goals in terms of our exercise. But just the key thing here is to really just realize that when making extrinsic motivational goals, it really doesn't lead to long-term physical activity engagement. And I like to use the example of creating a New Year's resolution, right? I can probably say that most of you will create a New Year's resolution, such as, okay, I'm going to lose this amount of weight, or I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week. But most of us by the second or third week of January will kind of forget about that goal. And being intrinsically motivated is actually harder to accomplish. So I really do want to emphasize that, but that's okay. What today will be about is really tapping into finding what motivates you and really reflecting on being intrinsically motivated. Okay, so I'm sure most of you have heard about goal setting before. And what we're going to be focusing on today is specifically creating process goals. So process goals are essentially the smaller goals that we work on, right? So that's really focusing on specific skills or behaviors that contribute to achieving our long-term goals. And what's really helpful about creating process goals, it's a great way to really break down those goals into smaller goals, right? If we create a vague goal of, okay, I want to increase strength, okay, that's great for an outcome goal, but how are you going to do that? And it's, a great way to kind of start your exercise journey by setting 2 or 3 process goals. What can you work on a weekly basis? And I think what's really key here is make sure you write them down, right? It's all well and good to kind of, think about these goals, but keep track of them, write them down in a journal or diary. So an example of a process goal is I'm going to go for a 3 km run in the morning 2 times a week in under 32 minutes, right? So I'm really breaking things down, right? So for example, the outcome goal for this would be I want to increase my overall endurance. So it's really focusing on, okay, well, how are we going to do that? How can we break down that goal? And I'm sure that a lot of you have heard of creating SMART goals before, but this is something that's really important to keep in mind when you're creating process goals. So we want to ensure that our goals are specific, right? Again, creating a vague goal, such as I want to increase my endurance. That's great, but how are we actually going to go about it? Ensuring it's measurable. I think achievable is probably and a realistic are the 2 the most important components of setting SMART goals. Especially when we're new to exercise, we want to make sure that we're setting realistic goals and achievable goals. Because if we're setting goals that are completely out of our ability to achieve, it's going to kind of make us feel a little bit defeated and kind of change our overall relationship with exercise. And lastly, time bound, right? We want to kind of create goals that are timely, right? So how long are we going to be working on this goal, right? When are we going to kind of, monitor it and say, okay, well, maybe it's time for me to work on a more challenging goal. So again, keeping in mind, the five different components, but I'd say, especially for new exercisers, really focusing on, creating goals that are achievable, but also realistic. And I think the most important aspect of actually creating goals is monitoring your progress. And I think, when I'm working with new athletes and new exercisers, I think, the biggest mistake that's made is really not monitoring your progress, right? Really writing down those goals and monitoring your goals on a weekly basis. And really, after each workout, it's really a great way to also look at your achievements, right? You kind of reflect back after a couple weeks and look at, okay, well, actually there's, I've been able to, whether it's, decrease my time by 15 seconds when I went on a run, or I was able to run for, 0.5 km longer, right? So it's a really nice way to, one, remain accountable, but also to see your progress and look at your achievements. So an example of, monitoring your progress, right? For going back to the process goal from the last slide, is writing it down, whether it's on a daily basis or weekly basis. So for example, Monday, February 15th, I went for a 3 km run this morning in 31 minutes and 37 seconds, right? So it's key, again, to look at, okay, when am I doing this? How long was I running for? But also what time? And again, by monitoring the time, this gives us something that is timely, but also we're able to kind of say, okay, well, maybe we can challenge ourselves a little bit more. Maybe next time I want to run this in 31 minutes and 30 seconds, for example. Or, I'm going to run 3 km in the morning 3 times a week in under 32 minutes instead of twice a week, right? So we want to really monitor our goals on a weekly basis, but we also want to challenge ourselves. Now, I'm going to give you guys just a couple of minutes to reflect on this and come up with one exercise process goal that you can start working on this week. So really focus on, one goal that you can start this week. And it could be, as simple as, I'm going to start going on a walk once a week for 20 minutes. But really, taking into consideration going back to our SMART goals. So setting a goal that's specific, setting a goal that's measurable, achievable, realistic, and timely. So I'll give everybody just a couple of minutes to really reflect on one exercise process goal that you can start on working on this week. So we'll give everybody till about 6:23, so about 3-4 minutes just to reflect on that. And keeping in mind, making these goals as specific and as realistic as possible. All right, we're going to have some great process goals coming in. So doing a plank, I mean, planks are definitely difficult, and that's an awesome goal to set, but it's really reflecting on it. How can I make that more, like, a little bit more specific, right? So for example, I'm going to do a 1-minute plank twice a week at the end of my workout, right? So it's kind of taking that goal and making it a little bit more specific and measurable. Okay, so 1 time a week, I'm going to run 15 minutes and increasing the time each week regardless of the distance. I like that. I definitely like that goal. I'll do 20 squats 3 times a week in under 3 minutes. Again, making it specific and making it measurable and timely. 15 minutes of my usual stretching routine twice a week. I think it's really important to consider that exercise isn't just rigorous activity. So I really like that, we're reflecting on what is realistic for us, but also what is best for us, right? Stretching is a huge part of helping us feel better, but also increasing our ability to engage in different kinds of exercises. Okay. Going out for 8,000 steps, whether running or walking 4 times a week, yes. And I think that's another thing is making sure that we're being realistic in the sense of, when we start exercising, especially if we're going on a run, we're not going to be able to run for the entire session, right? So it's having that acceptance that, look, it's okay if I'm running and walking, right? It's kind of, slowly but surely coming to the point that you feel more comfortable with running for the entire session. Daily stretches and exercises such as press-ups, sit-ups, squats before going to the library. Yeah, so again, kind of trying to develop a routine. Let's see, complete mobility work 5 times a week, absolutely. Going for a 20-minute run once a week, and step it up to 25 minutes the week after, then 30 minutes. Start at a low intensity and gradually working up to a more vigorous intensity. Yes, I love how specific that goal was. But again, that kind of gives you, a step-by-step process of how to navigate this goal, right? All right. Yeah, some really great goals, guys. And again, there's no right or wrong in terms of what you're working on, but just remembering, I want to make this goal as specific as possible, and I want to make it realistic. Arch and bow stretch once a day for 10 minutes during work time. Yes, and I like that you're incorporating that into your work day, right? Again, if you have a 9-to-5 job or you're a student that's sitting down all day, it's so important to kind of incorporate those times that we have a break, right? Getting up and any movement that's possible during the day is so helpful. That's great. Some really great answers, guys. Just give everybody else another minute. 10 squats before classes. Yes, I like that. Again, incorporating that into your daily routine or weekly routine. All right. So this brings us into developing a routine. And again, this might be, quite a basic skill, but really it is so helpful in being able to really develop healthy habits. And again, I want to emphasize that, for beginner exercisers, this is going to look different, right? For some people, it may be, starting off with exercising once a week, whether that's going for a 20-minute walk, whether that's doing, one online class, but it's really, gradually building up the point that we can start to exercise more, but also incorporating that into our schedule, right? So, and this is just an example of a routine for either a beginner exerciser or somebody that's been exercising for a little while. But again, you can notice that, I don't really have vigorous activity throughout the entire week. A lot of it is about movement, right? I mean, some of us may even, only have time for, a 20-minute workout. So I think it's really about ensuring that we're having those breaks during the day and we're giving ourselves that time for movement, but also a break away from the computer screen. I think that's a huge thing as well. Now, this is probably one of my most favorite components to talk about. And I'm sure that a lot of you are aware of what self-talk is. So essentially what self-talk is statements that we say to ourselves either internally, right, or out loud. And what could be really positive about using self-talk is it can really help us in navigating ourselves through a tough session. It can also improve our self-esteem, our motivational levels, not only during exercise, but before exercise, but also improve our concentration on specific tasks. And I'm sure that a lot of you have had experiences of using self-talk, whether it was within exercise or other capacities. But I think it's really important to acknowledge that there can be self-talk that's quite helpful for us, and there can be self-talk that's actually not so helpful. So we'll go through in a moment kind of determining what self-talk is helpful, right? How is in the way that we talk to ourselves going to help us motivate ourselves, but also maintain exercise engagement. Now, there are two types of self-talk. So essentially there's instructional self-talk. So this is more so kind of giving yourself instructions during a exercise in terms of kind of focusing on a specific skill. So for example, let's say that I'm doing sit-ups. An instructional self-talk cue that I would give to myself is remember to tense your abdomen. Whereas motivational self-talk is more focused on statements that you say to yourself to motivate yourself, right? So such as, I can do this, only 3 reps more, right? So you can see the contrast there between the different types of self-talk. And there's no right or wrong in terms of which one that you choose. It's really based on the context and which one really works best for you. Now, I'm sure that some of you had the experience of actually talking to yourself in a negative or unhelpful way, right? And I think it's important to identify that there will be, specific kind of self-talk for some individuals that works really well, right? You might see, for example, in a sport context or an exercise context, somebody saying to themselves, you have to do better, you have to do this. That's actually quite motivating for some people. But for other people, it could actually be, quite deterring. So it's important to really determine, when we are using self-talk, whether that's internally to ourselves or out loud, is this helpful for us? And there's not really a right or wrong in terms of, should we use, negative self-talk, positive self-talk, instructional self-talk, or motivational self-talk, but it's really determining what works best for you. So I say for the most part, most individuals really thrive if it's either positive or helpful self-talk. So when I say helpful self-talk, it's not necessarily positive or negative. It's just more so self-talk that helps you in focusing on the task and to really enhance your performance. So really, take a moment to reflect. Is the way that I've talked to myself in the past, either before or during exercise, has that been helpful? Has that had a positive or negative impact on my behavior? And if it's had a negative impact, how could I talk to myself in a more helpful way? And I think this is especially, important before exercise, right? And talking to ourselves in a way that really, helps motivate ourselves to exercise, but also maintain exercise engagement. So again, really reflect on that and determine, what really works best for you. So this brings me to some top tips for engaging in exercise. And I think, the most important thing to reflect on for today is remembering your why. You will have, days or moments that you don't feel like exercising, and that's okay. We're not going to feel motivated 100% of the time. So it's taking the time to reflect and say, what is my why? Why have I started to engage in exercise? Why do I want to continue to engage in exercise? And that will really help you in remembering why you're engaging in physical activity. Creating a weekly routine, again, this can be so helpful in really creating those healthy habits, and really remaining accountable. And I think, something that's quite helpful as well is incorporating, whether it be your partner or friends or colleagues into your routine. Can you do, for example, a virtual workout with one of your colleagues, right? And it kind of helps kind of you remain accountable, but also you can motivate one another. Break things down. I think this is kind of especially, an important thing to remember for new exercisers. I think it could be quite overwhelming, if you're going into the gym for the first time or you're trying a new exercise for the first time. It's important to really break things down and remember, okay, maybe there are one or two things I'm going to focus on today. It may be, learning to squat for the first time, or it may be, going out for a run the first time. Really breaking things down can be really helpful in determining, what you want to work on. So going back to our process goals. So again, those are the smaller skills and behaviors that we work on. Really start by creating 2 or 3 process goals. And remembering, the most important thing is that you want to set goals that are realistic, but also attainable, right? We don't want to set, especially for a new exerciser, we don't want to set unrealistic goals. They're actually going to be quite deterring. So again, setting those realistic goals and also monitoring those goals. I think that's a component that, a lot of individuals will start setting goals, but it's, monitoring them and really acknowledging and looking at, hey, I've actually been able to improve, for example, my run time over the last couple of weeks. Identify which self-talk really works best for you. And again, there's not a right or wrong here. Whether it's, negative self-talk, positive self-talk, instructional self-talk, or motivational self-talk, it's really taking the time to reflect and saying, is this type of self-talk really having a positive impact on my exercise behaviors? Is it motivating me? Is it helping me, push through that extra set or push through that extra rep? So again, find a way that really is helpful in talking to yourself. And last, a key takeaway is any progress is progress. This can be, running for an extra 5 seconds. This can be, doing an extra squat. Really taking time to reflect and be proud of your achievements. And even being proud of yourself for, getting up and putting your exercise clothes on. That's progress. Any step that you take to actually start to engage in those behaviors is progress. So I think that's, definitely a key takeaway that I would say in acknowledging that progress and being proud of that progress, no matter how small that you might perceive it to be.
I have a question, Serena.
Yeah, of course.
For people like myself or other staff members who want to try and engage students in physical activity, or student coaches trying to engage other students to become active, is there a way that we can help people find their why?
And that's a great question. I think, it really comes down to, going back to the intrinsic motivation, right? I think acknowledging that, finding that intrinsic motivation is going to be something that you're going to find right away, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really focusing on, okay, what is really the reason why you're engaging in exercise? What motivates you? What is going to help you and really engage in physical activity long term? But I think it's also, asking them, what do you like, right? It may be, okay, I like, for example, going for walks in the park. Okay, great. That's physical activity. That's exercise. It could be, actually, I like skipping. Okay, great. I think it's asking them, giving them a little bit of autonomy and asking them what they like, right? What their interests are. Yeah. And I think, looking at it from the perspective of physical activity is, exercise isn't just working out in the gym. So it's really finding, asking that individual, what do they like, but also focusing on, you know, what are the intrinsic kind of motivational factors there?
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it really does. Thank you.
I think also another thing, and I kind of, you know, reflecting on this a little bit, is having an exercise partner. I think, you know, especially during lockdown, it can be really difficult to maintain motivation, right, to exercise every day. So it's having that that exercise partner to maintain that motivation and actually keep each other accountable, right? So for example, I have an exercise partner. So he's actually based in the States, but we, you know, catch up once a week and say, hey, you know, today we're going to do 2 online workouts. And it really keeps each other accountable in a really nice way as well, to kind of remain social as well. I think that's, you know, another thing as well, and is what we're really lacking during lockdown, but it's, you know, keeping in touch with others, but also having somebody to keep you accountable. Yeah, awesome. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody so much for, you know, taking the time to listen to that. And again, I can appreciate that it's quite a brief overview of, you know, understanding how to prepare for exercise. But I will send Lauren the slides out after, just so you guys can reflect on it. But do feel free to send me an email if you do have any questions. So if anybody does have any questions at this point, we have about 10-15 minutes for questions. Please do feel free to take off your mic, or you can enter them in the chat. I'm just going to check. Oh yeah, just put the emails in there. So if anybody does have any questions, do feel free to ask. I just want to preface this with there are no silly questions. A lot of the time, I'm quite nervous myself to ask questions during a workshop, but this is, you know, really a safe space to ask any questions that you do have regarding preparing for exercise.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi, how are you?
Break the ice. Hi, thank you for very short but actually very informative presentation and helpful. My problem, I think, and my question is that I am ex-competitive dancer in the ballroom dancing, and then when I quit, every time I exercise, I was like, why I'm doing it, because I don't have competitions anymore. Like, so I guess it was like like outside goals that motivated me. And today I struggle to find like why it is good for me, but like I'm trying, I'm on and off. So I don't know, maybe you can give some tips about that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for your question. I think, you know, part of that comes down to identity, right? Because especially, you know, when we are competitive athletes and then we retire, it's kind of questioning, well, what is my identity, right? I know what my athletic identity was, you know, I'm a dancer, but it's looking at, well, what is my identity as an individual, right? And that's a really good place to start. I know that seems like a very, you know, broad concept, but asking yourself, you know, what is my identity outside of being a competitive dancer? And really, you know, how can I use exercise as, you know, a way to enjoy it, right? Are there components of exercise that, you know, maybe remind you of being a competitive dancer? You know, maybe you enjoy, you know, let's say the strength and conditioning aspect of exercise. Okay, great. Well, I want to incorporate that into my exercise program. So I think it's firstly kind of looking at your identity, you know, as an individual, but also looking at, you know, who you want to be and really what motivates you, and that can you incorporate, you know, some of the things that you enjoyed as a competitive dancer. I mean, what was kind of the most, I guess, enjoying like thing for you as a competitive dancer from an exercise perspective?
Dancing itself, I guess.
Can you incorporate that into your daily routine? You know, having half an hour to dance, you know, whether that be, you know, half an hour of, you know, doing kind of freestyle jazz, but it's asking yourself, you know, what am I going to enjoy? What is going to be something that I will genuinely enjoy, want to continue engaging in?
Sometimes it's just painful for me emotionally, I think. And sometimes I even prefer doing a total different thing. but I'm trying other dances actually, and yeah, it's something that fits my soul right now. Yeah.
I think if it is something that's, from a emotional perspective, of course, it's going to be difficult, especially when we, retire from sport, right? So if it's something that is going to trigger you, it's saying, okay, well, is there a kind of a different component, like you said, maybe a different style of dance, or it can be, completely irrelevant from dance, right? But it's looking at what is my identity, as an individual, and what motivates me as that individual, right? What really do I enjoy? Because if we go back to, looking at intrinsic motivation, that's really what leads us to long-term physical activity. Did that answer your question? Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I know
Feel
it's a
free to
process and it takes effort, and I'm motivated to achieve it right now. I hope the same will be tomorrow.
Yeah, that's great. But write it down. Like, take time to reflect after this presentation. Write down, what that goal is, and reflect on it tomorrow. Yeah. I'm sorry, I do have a couple of questions there. Let me just see. Good presentation, lack of motivation is my issue. We'll try and incorporate the methodology of adding exercise each week. It's a good idea. Thank you for that. You're very welcome, Larry. Thank you so much for attending. And I think, motivation is something that, I want to be clear that it's going to be something that it's not going to be a constant, right? We're not always going to be motivated, right? So it's also having a little bit of self-compassion and saying, you know what, today I don't feel like doing a HIIT workout, but can I go outside and get some fresh air and, have a 20-minute walk, right? So it's not just kind of necessarily focusing on, okay, I have to do a vigorous exercise today. It's focusing on movement, and having some compassion for yourself that, especially during lockdown, we are not going to be constantly motivated, right? So I think really, two things: focusing on movement, but also focusing on enjoyment, right? We're not going to continue to engage in exercise that we don't enjoy. Personally, for me, I can't stand hot yoga, so I'm not going to continue to do hot yoga, right? And for myself, I really focus on, what I enjoy. And for myself, it's the social component of the gym. So I've, joined a local gym where I can kind of connect with, other exercisers, and we have virtual online sessions, and that's actually maintained my motivation throughout lockdown. But I think it's, also acknowledging that it's okay to not be motivated all the time. What can we do to, just in terms of increasing our movement on a daily basis? Let's see. Good presentation. I feel really motivated. Thank you. You're so welcome, Bridget. Thank you so much for attending. Lucy, I agree. The impact of lockdown is immense. I just want to eat and hibernate. Yes, but Lucy, sometimes it's actually okay to acknowledge that, we're not going to want to exercise and be motivated every day, right? So I think it's just kind of starting off slow as well. Whether we have maybe once a week, we're going to incorporate exercise into our routine, right? Starting off slow and adding as we go on. A couple weeks in, okay, actually, I feel quite good after going on a 20-minute walk outside. Let's try and do 2, right? So it's really focusing on, how it makes us feel as well. How do you feel after exercise, and how do you feel incorporating that into your daily routine? Let's see. Lockdown has had an impact on many. Motivation is difficult. I bought a mini trampoline. Bridget, that is awesome. I love that. And I think, again, it's kind of being creative as well in what you have. I mean, for myself, when I work out, sometimes I use tins of beans, right? How can we be more creative, based on what we enjoy? That's awesome. All right. Does anybody else have any other questions in regards to kind of mental preparation for exercise?
I just wanted to ask, actually, sorry.
Okay.
I come from like a long line of playing team sports, so obviously not having the community feels super hard, but also, like, what would be your top tip for intrinsically motivating yourself? Because obviously I've always heavily relied on my teammates from all, I played more than one sport, so from the community surrounding those forms of fitness. So what would be your best, like a beginner sort of tip, but also kind of, wanted to touch on the fact that I'm kind of petrified of leaving school sport, if that makes sense. Like I'm in my last year, I haven't played sport for like the last year, but it's fine. But like obviously once this year's over, I feel like the same, like what do I do? Like I've always played competitive sport. But yeah, there's two things there, sorry.
No, I mean, like it's difficult. I think at the end of the day, you know, there are two things that you kind of touched on there: the social component, but also, you know, continuing to engage in exercise. So I think from a social perspective, right? I mean, are there kind of other you know, groups that you can join in terms of exercise? You know, are there kind of local like either, you know, virtual groups that you can really you know, take part in, but also acknowledging that, you know, you'll continue to kind of keep touch with those teammates afterwards, right? So it's kind of just being aware of creating, you know, a community for yourself, right? Whether it's, you know, again, you can, you know, join a local club, right? And kind of just make sure that you're creating that kind of community for yourself, because it does sound like the social aspect is really important for you, right? So kind of maintaining that. And I think also, you know, the transition of, you know, playing at school to then, you know, I went through that myself, being at Roehampton. You know, I played football for 4 years, and I think, you know, I took some time to process it, but I think it's also, you know, looking at it as, you know, that's not kind of the end, right? I can still play football outside of that. So, you know, looking at, you know, what's your sport?
Well, I play basketball's my primary sport, but I also play rugby, and I also do CrossFit, which has a massive community. So obviously, it's really hard not doing anything related to that. So they're quite heavy social sports, to be fair.
And I think that's a great point of, you know, things like CrossFit, even now, like they do have, you know, CrossFit they're doing virtually, right? So can you join like a local club? But there is still, you know, sport after university. You know what I mean? There's local clubs that you can reach out to. So it's really, you know, coming back to, okay, what is most important to me in terms of being part of a team sport? Well, it's the social component and that connection, but also kind of maintaining physical engagement. So I think, you know, really asking yourself, okay, if the social engagement is the most important to me, how can I maintain that, right? Either maintain it with the teams that I'm part of right now, but also post university, you know, join a local club, you know, maybe join, you know, a different, you know, CrossFit club, right? So it's really looking at how to create that community, but also, you know, focusing on what you enjoy. And I think that kind of comes back to your intrinsic motivation question, that, you know, it's quite difficult to kind of find this, you know, intrinsic motivation within us. It is very difficult, right? But it's really, you know, focusing on what is most important to me, but also what do I enjoy, right? So if I can, you know, focus on those two things I enjoy out of being a part of a team sport, you know, whether that's, you know, continuing to engage in physical activity and the social aspect, how can I take those two things and really translate it, you know, post-university? Does that make sense?
Yeah, a lot. Thank you so much. I know you said there's no silly questions, but you know, you feel like a bit like kind of a bit embarrassed to admit that you're a bit like gonna miss like post uni. You're gonna think, oh, that sounds really sad to say out loud, but I know I'm not the only one.
You're not, and I think, you know, I really, you know, thank you so much for sharing that, because I think it's something that, you know, a lot of people don't talk about, you know, in terms of kind of that transition post university. But it's also acknowledging that, you know, I can still be an athlete, right? I may not be a university athlete, but I can still be an athlete. I can still have that social component, right? I can join local clubs or join clubs outside of university. So it's just acknowledging that, yeah, you know, that time of really taking the time to process of leaving university, you know, can be quite tough, right? And taking your time to process that, acknowledging that, you know, it's not the end. I'll still be able to have that social component and still be able to engage in sport post university.
Can I just jump in?
Thank you so much. Yeah, go for it.
Just while we're talking about community and not being alone, I don't know how many of you have Strava, but we have a Strava group called Row Uni Community. I will just send it in there. If you don't have Strava, Strava is an app where you can record your runs, your walks, your cycles, and we have a group for our sports teams, but we also have this community group which is aimed at people who are either starting out in exercise or feeling a bit lonely. You can join the group and you just record your whether it's 10-minute walk or whatever, and you can take a photo of your surroundings and upload it. And it's just a way to keep in touch with people, because we're all in the same boat, I think. So yeah, it's free to join as well. So please feel free to join and yeah, show us what you're up to and have a chat.
I love that, Lauren. I think that's a fantastic suggestion. And again, it helps kind of you remain accountable, right? And motivated that, hey, like I'm doing this with a group of people, you know, we can, and also that social connection.
Yeah.
Let me just see. So I think I did miss one question. I think for men, loss of benefits of exercise during lockdown. It will take much longer to regain strength once lockdown is over. Negative thought, but hard to get over. Yes. And I think, you know, it is really, you know, difficult, especially when we don't have access to, you know, so the same means that we had, you know, prior to lockdown. But how can we recreate that, right? How can we kind of recreate, if we don't have access to a gym, are there still things that we can do, right? So for example, you know, can I go outside and, you know, do squat jumps? You know, can I use, you know, 2 tins of beans instead and squat with that, or do push-ups, right? So there's still ways that we can kind of work around it, but it's being creative, you know, being creative in terms of, you know, what we have access to at home, but also, you know, join those local clubs, right? There's so many gyms right now and clubs that are doing things online, you know, such as Sport Roehampton, right? They have that great, you know, sense of community there. So it's really, you know, looking at it is, okay, let's make those connections and let's really, you know, remain connected during this time. Okay. All right.
Sorry,
I think
also,
all the other questions.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm also going to just pop our Instagram
Lauren.
handle. Am I frozen?
No, you're back now.
Sorry, I was just popping our Instagram. So there's a few questions about where to find the classes we have and stuff. So yeah, like Danielle said, it's either on the student portal, or if you follow us on Instagram, you'll keep up to date with other events like this, or any free workouts or workshops that we've got going on. So yeah.
You know, thank you for that, Lauren. I think, you know, make use of these resources and ask for Roehampton. Reach out to people like Lauren. Ask like, hey, you know, what class is on this week? And really kind of, you know, stay connected to your university community. You know, really use those resources.
Yeah. Sorry, can I ask one more question? Is it okay?
Of course. Yeah.
Thank you. Sometimes I struggle to do something, but sometimes, for example, if I finally get out and walk, I cannot like stop, you know, like I walk and I run, and then it's taking so much time of mine. Then I think the next time I go, it also will take much time. So now I'm thinking maybe it's also good to limit, like to have this limitation times in terms of time, even though I have the drive and body ability to do it, or no? Like, what will you?
I think that's a really good question. You know, I think, you know, at the end of the day, it's looking at it as, you know, is this a healthy behavior, right? Is it something that, you know, actually can be incorporated into my daily routine? You know, if we're talking, you know, excessive exercise in the sense of, you know, exercising for 6 hours a day, it's reflecting, okay, well, you know, is that kind of, you know, a healthy way, a healthy behavior to engage in? So you can set, you know, boundaries in terms of kind of the length of time that you exercise. You know, it's also ensuring that, because I think, you know, sometimes when we engage in exercise for a long period of time, we can kind of do it on autopilot, right? And where we're not kind of, you know, engaging in the present moment. So something that can be really nice is something called grounding, to kind of just come back to the present moment, right? See how I'm feeling, you know, having a check-in. And whether it's, for example, let's say, you know, that you're running, how do my feet feel on the ground? How am I feeling right now? And that's a really nice way to kind of check in and come back to the present moment. But again, it's having that, because, you know, again, I think it's very easy to exercise on autopilot, right? It's very easy to really do anything on autopilot, especially if it's something that we've been doing, you know, for a long period of time. So it's having that check-in. You know, do we have physical cues that we can come back to the present moment and ask ourselves, hey, you know, am I feeling okay? You know, do I need to take a break? Does that make sense? Yeah, do feel free to email me afterwards, because I can definitely touch base and kind of provide more resources and signposts regarding that. Yeah, but thank you so much for your question. All right. Well, everybody, I just want to thank you guys for joining me this evening. I know that most of our world right now is virtual, so I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to listen and engage. And like Lauren said, please do join the Strava app and reach out to Sport Roehampton. They do have a lot of fantastic resources, and make use of them. Stay connected to one another. All right.
Thank you so much, Serena. That was really, really interesting, really eye-opening. Yeah, it was great. Thank you so much. And thanks everybody for taking part. It's nice to see so many people in one space. I haven't actually seen this many people for a long time. So
it is.
Yeah,
it is.
It's nice to see you all.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much, Lauren, for having me. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.